Trojans Talk Research is a monthly spotlight on the research interests of Troy's faculty presented by Troy University's Office of Sponsored Programs. This month, Dr. Alvin Diamond discusses his research on cataloging and preserving Alabama's incredible diversity.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming. My name is Alvin Diamond. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Biological and Environmental Sciences. One of my favorite quotes is from Margaret Mead. I was wise enough to never grow up while fooling most people into believing I had. And that's kind of been my philosophy. I was born and raised in Evergreen, a little town about 90 miles west of here, kind of in the middle of nowhere, about halfway between Montgomery and Mobile. I'm a Troy graduate, Troy State graduate. I came here and graduated in 1984 with my master's degree. I was originally going into environmental science. I always knew I wanted to do something with plants or animals or something like that. And really, kind of like a lot of our students, didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So I got up to graduation, almost a semester before graduation, started looking for jobs, saw what they paid, saw kind of the work that they did, and decided, that's not for me. So what do? Keep going to school. So I went to Auburn, I got my master's and PhD from there, and full circle came back in 1988 to Troy University and was hired as the first director of the Arboretum, and I'm also curator of the herbarium. So my research basically focuses on biodiversity. Biodiversity refers to the number of plants and animals and other living organisms that we have. And Alabama is extremely biodiverse. We are the most biodiverse state that's found east of the Mississippi. We're fourth in the United States. The other three states are Texas, California, and Hawaii. This map kind of shows biodiversity. The darker the colors, the more orange or green that they are, that indicates more species occurring in that area. Alabama is incredibly diverse in both plants and animals. We have more species of many different groups of organisms than any other state. About 27% of all freshwater species of fish found in North America can be found somewhere in Alabama. About 22% of all the crayfish, 61% of the freshwater mussels, 57% freshwater turtles, 28% of freshwater snails. My research primarily has focused to a greater extent on plants. We have about 4,298 species of vascular plants, including 34 endemic species that thus far have been documented from Alabama. That process continues to go on. Endemic species are those that are found nowhere else. So they're only found in Alabama, no other state, no other place in the world. But not everything is well in our little corner of Eden here. Alabama is incredibly biodiverse, but we're also ranked second for the total number of extinctions. And organisms that are extinct are gone forever. They're gone everywhere. They're not just disappeared from Alabama, they're gone entirely. We have 143 species that are listed on the endangered species list. These are species that are threatened with extinction. They're very, very rare. We have the least amount of public lands of any state in the eastern United States. We have very few areas that are protected to preserve biodiversity. In addition, most species receive little or no legal protection. You always hear these stories that people talk about, oh, well, if you find something rare in your land, the government's going to come take it away from you. They don't do that. In fact, the only protections most plants receive is if they occur on public land, like a national forest or a state park. If you take them off from somebody's property without their permission, you can be charged with trespassing, not for actually doing anything to the plants. or if you get involved with a project that has federal funding. The federal funding does require protection of endangered species. Alabama doesn't. Some of the things that are driving this include invasive species. We have a lot of plants and animals that have been brought in, more and more that come in every day. Those organisms move from where we put them. They escape out of your yard, go into natural habitats, and they replace native plants and animals. Climate change. You look outside, everything's blooming, budding out, and we had a freeze last night. People used to say global warming, and that gave people a incorrect perception of what was occurring. It's not that just the temperatures are increasing, but it's also kind of like a spinning top. Things are wobbling. So we have more of these extreme fluctuations, heavy storms, heavy rains, powerful hurricanes, warm temperatures and then sudden freezes, hot spells. All of those affect all of the organisms out in our environment. Of course, habitat loss. If you've gone through out here off from 231 between Lowe's and Publix and the rec center, see all the new houses they're building out there. That was all forested land, home to plants and animals. Most people think, well, if you go in and clear the woods, the animals and things that live there, they're just going to move out somewhere else and find another place to live. Thing is, most places are already occupied. There are already things living there. So when you go in and get rid of that habitat, you're basically condemning those organisms to death. They may be able to survive for a short time, but most of them are not going to find any place else to live. And the biggest thing that is a problem in Alabama is apathy and lack of awareness. Most people don't know what we have. And if you don't even know what you have, there's no way you can appreciate it. So a lot of my research focuses on filling in knowledge gaps. We work with the Alabama Plant Atlas, which is a group of curators from the different herbaria across the state, looking to document the distribution and the occurrence of plants in Alabama. When we originally started the project, there were 5 green dots on this map. And the darker green something is, that means that more species have been documented there. The darker red they are, less species. Originally, there was a dot up around Jack State, one at Tuscaloosa, one at Auburn, one at Troy, and one at Mobile. Places where there were major collections of plants in institutions. Rest of the state, very little collecting had been done anywhere. We really didn't know what occurs down there. I've collected over 30,000 specimens that have been put into herbaria. The plants are pressed and dried, and then they're affixed to a special type of paper. And the paper is acid-free. It's an archival paper. And once these plants have been pressed and dried, they're given a label. And this serves as a documentation of a species occurring in a particular place at a particular time. So anyone doing research can go and look at these specimens and say, okay, well, this plant used to occur there, it doesn't anymore. Or this is the type of habitat that this plant occurs in, maybe we should look in these areas close to this. A lot of my research has involved graduate and undergraduate students. One of the best ways to get students aware, involved, and increase their education and enthusiasm is put them out there, put them to work, get them involved, doing some hands-on stuff. You can sit there and lecture to somebody all day, and for most people, as soon as they leave the room, that's going to start disappearing. They're going to forget it. But if you get somebody out there and actually put them hands-on, doing the work, being involved, they're going to remember that. Currently, the Troy University Herbarium holds over 50,000 species of vascular plants. Dr. Michael Woods is here with us, was co-curator till his retirement. We were fortunate to get a grant from the National Science Foundation that helped us to get compactors. So we have a really nice setup and room to grow in the herbarium. My work has taken me to 60 of Alabama's 67 counties, all of the gray ones on the map, to do work of some type. Most of my research has focused in the Wiregrass region, which is the southeastern part of Alabama down here, and in particular the Red Hills region, which is a little band that occurs across through about the Troy area, Monroeville, over to Mississippi. The Black Belt, which is a little bit north of us, this is a grassland prairie region that goes through Montgomery and Lowndes County over to West Alabama. And of course the Wiregrass, which are these extreme southeastern counties down here, Houston, Geneva, Covington, Escambia. So thus far, I've been able to finish floras for a number of counties. Started out with Conecuh County, did Crenshaw, Pike, Butler. Currently working on Houston and Montgomery counties and Lowndes counties. We've had graduate students who have done floors for Coffee County and Dale County and Autauga County. So when you look at that map, you saw that a lot of counties in southeast Alabama were green. And that's due to the part that our students have helped to play in that, both graduates and undergraduates. And Dr. Woods and I over the years have had students to do floras places like Dale County Lake, the Pike County Pocosin, up to entire counties. And all of their collections have been put into the herbarium where they're available for other researchers. And these specimens are used for a number of different things. We've had researchers from all over the world borrow them, looking at identifying species, doing revisions of floras, doing revisions of genera. Now a lot of work is being done with DNA, so we get requests for pieces of plant material so that people can look at DNA, things that are going on with it. They've also been used in studies like climate change. These specimens, you can look at when they're flowering and fruiting and seeing if over time that has been affected by some of the changes we have in our climate. So pretty much southeast Alabama has been the main focus of what I work on with plants. So what have I found? Well, there are new species being discovered that nobody has ever seen or known of before. We usually think about people going to the tropics to discover new species, but there are new species of plants and animals being discovered here, and particularly in Alabama, all of the time. This is a type of pawpaw. It's the Piedmont hybrid pawpaw. It was first found in Montgomery County in 2019. Probably been here all along, we just didn't know it, nobody had gone out and looked for it. You would think Montgomery being a big county, being the state capital there and everything like that, there would have been a lot of work done there, but that wasn't really the case. Leonard's witch hazel is a species that was described from Mississippi and was found in the Camp Shelby area down in South Mississippi. After that, it started to be found in similar habitats in the Red Hills in southwest Alabama. We now have it documented all the way over from the Mississippi line to Pike County. Rollins ginger is a species that is endemic to Alabama, that is, that it's not found anywhere else. It was discovered in Baldwin County, and as far as we know, it is still only known from an area of just a few square miles outside of the city of Daphne. It was totally new to science. It's something that's very different from all of the other related species. If you are familiar with the wild gingers, this one looks very, very distinct. Miller's witch alder is a species that was confused with another species. It was thought to be a wide-ranging species that occurred from the Carolinas all the way down to Florida and over into Mississippi and Louisiana. But doing DNA work, they found that the plants here in the Florida Panhandle and South Alabama were distinct from any others. And the witch hazel, or witch alder, has been found in Geneva County, Baldwin County, and Escambia County. Unfortunately, the Escambia County population has already been destroyed. road widening, they went from 2-lane to 4-lane and took out the few little individuals that were still left of that population. New species have to be described and named. In science, we have a process of going through when we apply names to different organisms. You have to write up a description, both in English and in Latin, saying how it differs from all the other known species in that group. So these are 3 species that I've named. They're all species of ginger. 2 of them are endemic to Alabama, one found in North Alabama, one found in South Alabama. And one is almost endemic to Alabama. It does get over into Georgia a little bit, and it's found right in the middle of the state. All of these have been found within the last 10 years. So who knows what else is still out there. There are also species that are known to science but have not been known to occur in Alabama. Sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. This species I found up in Montgomery County, it's called the branch broomrape. It is a non-photosynthetic plant. It's a flowering plant, but it doesn't have chlorophyll. It's a parasite. And it has roots that attach to the roots of other plants, and it steals nutrients and water from them. It's parasitic on a number of plants that we grow for food, in particular tomatoes. In California, it's been introduced, and it's a major pest in tomato crops in California. It reduces the yield and can actually kill the plant if the infestation is bad enough. Of course, those of you from this area know Geneva County, it's a big tomato growing area. So this is something we need to be on the lookout for, take care of it before it gets too bad. Shiny coneflower, another species that was first collected in Alabama in 2016. Previous to that, it was thought to only occur in Florida and Georgia. Lynnhaven golden aster, it was endemic to Florida. It was only found in Florida until it was collected in Covington County in 2019. Florida likes to boast about all their endemic species and all, so it's always nice to steal one away from them. Gloriosa lily is a species from Africa. It's often cultivated, and it's kind of weird. It's a viney lily that actually climbs, and it has started to escape. A lot of times, these invasive species we have are things that were brought in for ornamentals, things to grow in your yard. Sometimes they sit there for years and behave themselves, they don't spread, and then all of a sudden they start showing up in natural habitats. So this is one that we kind of need to keep an eye on and see what it's going to do. Is this just a one-time occurrence where it's escaped, or is this just the beginning of an invasion? Sometimes you find things that have been known from here but had been not seen in a long time. They were thought to be extirpated. The least snout bean was last seen in Alabama in 1870, and in 2014 I found it over in Lowndes County. Tropical whiteweed, 1886 up until 2014 when I found it down in Geneva County. And drooping fork fern, it was last seen in 1914 until it reappeared in 2020. So sometimes we think things are gone, but we just haven't looked in the right places, or there's not enough people out looking for them. So maybe some of those things that we thought are extinct or extirpated are still out there, and just we need people to find them. Another thing I do is look at rare species. Why are they rare? What causes them to be rare? What makes them so special? There are many different things. Sometimes we can figure it out, sometimes we can't. The winter grape fern is a type of fern that grows in late winter, early spring. It's a little bitty fern. It's not very typical looking. It has one leaf. It's flat down on the ground, usually grows in grassy areas. The grass grows up from the leaf, so you can't really even see it. The only thing you can see is this little stalk that comes up and produces spores. The easiest way to survey for this fern is to go out where it grows, and it's most often found in cemeteries for some reason, probably because they're pretty well maintained. But you go out in the cemetery, find you a nice open spot, lay down on the ground, put your head on the ground, and look out across the grass, and you can see these little stalks sticking up. Occasionally you get some people that are curious about what's going on. I was up in Bullitt County one day and had a lady drive by, and she stopped and she turned around and she drove back by, and then she came back by and she parked across the road. And finally, I guess her curiosity got up to her, and then she rolled her window down and wanted to know, was I all right and everything going okay? And I told her, yeah, everything was fine. Luckily, she didn't see me when I got the shovel out and started digging in the cemetery. That would probably really have upset her. In the Poquoson area, about 6 miles east of town, there's a plant called sessile leaf pinecrest. It's related to cabbage. It's an annual. It sprouts from seed, grows, produces flowers, seed all in 1 year, and then it dies. And those seed are what carry it on through the next year. One of the things we thought that might be causing this plant to be particularly rare was that it wasn't forming enough seed. There weren't enough seed being produced to keep the population going. So we had some undergraduate students who did a research project, and they went out and wrapped bags around the flowers, looking at what insects pollinated them, which ones worked good. Was pollination even necessary? Did we need an insect to visit the flowers, or could the flowers just self-pollinate themselves? And apparently they can. Either the wind blowing the anthers around or something else is causing these to form seed even when insects can't get to them. So seed is not the limiting factor. We don't still know what the limiting factor is, but we can mark that one off the list. Eared coneflower is a species that I did my PhD research on. It's almost endemic to Alabama. All of the populations except 2 are found in the state. There's 1 in Georgia and 1 in Florida. It's a huge plant. They grow 8 to 10 feet tall, so this is a sunflower-looking plant. You can be driving down the road at 70 miles an hour and you will see this plant. It's not something you have to go out in the cemetery and lay down on the ground to find. This plant grows in wet areas. It's a composite, so each of these things that look like flowers are actually composed of hundreds of flowers. So these are called heads, and each of these heads produces anywhere from 100 to 300 seed. And an individual plant will have from dozens to hundreds of heads on it. So if you do the math, they're producing thousands of seed. Most of the black-eyed Susan types are pretty weedy. They grow on roadsides and stuff like this. This one, I did all sorts of stuff on it. It was producing plenty of seed. Seed were getting out. You can grow them really easy in the greenhouse. You just take the seed and throw them some dirt, keep them moist and in the sun. They grow really well. Looked at soil. It grows in acidic soil. It grows in basic soil. It grows in clay soil. It grows in sandy soil. It grows in peaty soil. Some of the plants are found in pitcher plant bogs down in Geneva County. On the other end of the spectrum, they're found in these limestone, kind of marly spring areas up around the Birmingham area. pH doesn't seem to affect it. Nutrients in the soil don't seem to affect it. Pollinators not seem to be a problem. We still don't know. After 4 years and lots of work, there's still not a definitive reason of why this plant is so rare. I have a guess, but I can't say definitively. It needs open areas. It needs kind of open, sunny areas. And those originally were created by either the area burning, natural fires, which we've suppressed, either putting them out or with roads and our buildings and things that we have, or things like beavers. Beavers damming up streams, they flood an area. After they've finished, they leave, the dam washes out, water flows out. That creates an open area that then slowly returns back to forest. Beavers were almost wiped out in Alabama. So maybe this is some sort of lingering effect of the disappearance of the beavers, or almost disappearance of the beavers. Maybe we're still seeing some of that impact that they had on the environment, and their disappearance for a while still is affecting this plant. At the Arboretum, one of the things we do is to grow and propagate some of these rare plants, to investigate what conditions they need to grow on, what do you need to do to propagate them, potentially to reintroduce them, take some of these rare plants and put them back out into the environment to increase the population. I dabble in animal stuff too. When I had to choose, when you go into graduate school, you kind of go into botany or zoology. I like animals. Animals are cool, animals are fun. I chose plants for two reasons. One is there weren't a lot of people doing plants, so it was kind of wide open field. Lots of stuff to do that nobody had done. The other is plants sit there. You don't have to go chase them down. If you go into ornithology to study birds, the best time to do birding is at the crack of dawn, just when the sun comes up. And going out and getting up before daylight, tramping through the woods in the dark, getting out there when it's cold, and then standing there in the cold, silently listening for the birds, not one of my favorite things. If you do frogs and salamanders, the best time to do them is at night when it's raining. So go tramping through the swamp, stand out there in the swamp, waist deep in the water with the alligators around you and the cottonmouths and those sorts of fun things, and listen for frogs or catch salamanders. It's fun, but not something I want to do a lot of times. Plants just sit there, and they're there pretty much all the time. You go out at your leisure, they don't run away from you, they're just there. But I've had a graduate student who did some work on burrowing crayfish. She looked at some species that occur in pitcher plant bogs. Dr. Helms is here. He does a lot of crayfish work. There are a number of species in crayfish in Alabama, and these are not bog crayfish here, but these are some of the species that we found. But these bog crayfish are restricted to these wet habitats, and they burrow down in the ground, and they have tunnels and chambers in there. They're kind of tough to get out of the ground. You either have to dig them up, or there's some kind of crayfish fishing methods that for some species work, some that don't. But looking at these crayfish was kind of interesting in the role that they play. Crayfish eat a lot of material. They're kind of omnivores. They eat plant and animal material. They churn up the soil. They bring soil up to the surface, so that's recycling nutrients in there. Their tunnels and their little cavities fill up with water, so there are other species that use those, particularly when it gets dry. Things like salamanders and frogs, and even some fish will go down in crayfish tunnels. I had another graduate student who did a project looking at spiders. Spiders are an underappreciated group. They're very important. They eat a lot of insects that are potentially harmful or bothersome to us. Flies, mosquitoes, a lot of beetles, things like that. She looked at the different spiders found out in the Pocosin, comparing two different areas, the kind of mesic, which is kind of moist area, with the dry upland sandy areas. Found a lot of neat little spiders out there, and found several that were apparently new, hadn't been found in Alabama before. There are all sorts of spiders. Some make webs, some don't. Some live down in little tunnels in the ground. So interesting, kind of, one of those fun things to do. And of course, herps. That's probably my favorite group of animals. Herps are reptiles and amphibians. They are a bunch of different species we have in Alabama. Turtles, snakes, salamanders, frogs. We're right up there close to the top in the diversity of all of those different groups. And most people really get fascinated by herps. They like to see them, touch them. A lot of people don't get the opportunity. Most people in Alabama think, Only good snake is a dead snake. Well, when you're out walking, going around, every snake you see, you probably step on 9 or so that you don't ever see. Most of the snakes in Alabama are non-venomous. They can still bite you, but some of them are very small. Some snakes, their mature size is only a couple of inches long. We also have a lot of turtles. This is a alligator snapping turtle. It's one of the largest turtles in the world. It's also very rare. It's one of the species that was hunted for turtle soup. They have disappeared from many areas in Alabama. Of course, we also have alligators, another species that almost disappeared. They've made a very good comeback now. We have actually an alligator trapping hunting season here. Herps are one of the ways to really get students, some of them anyway, excited about doing things out in the environment. We take students every year to the Alabama Partners in Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Conference that they have. One of the projects I have some students working on is a study of the herps in the Arboretum. Hopefully they will be to the point that they've got enough data this year that they'll actually be able to present. But they are going out, they're collecting turtles and snakes and frogs and things, they're identifying them, they're measuring them, they're weighing them, they're determining the sex of them. They're looking at different ways to catch them. There are different types of traps and things, looking at which ones are more efficient for a particular species. And just giving them some experience, giving them some hands-on stuff to do out there in the environment. Get kids outside, they're much more likely not to be looking at the phone and paying attention to you. Other things they're working on, I kind of have my fingers in all sorts of little pies. I go this way and that way. Invasive species, we've been working on a grant trying to get some of the invasive species removed from the Arboretum. We have, I like to say, every invasive species known to mankind except Kogon grass. I've threatened to go get some Kogon grass and plant it just so that we have all of them. We have kudzu, bittersweet, nandina, Russian olive, monkey grass, thorny olive, trifoliate orange, multiflora rose, China berry, popcorn tree. We have lots of opportunity to experiment with invasive species. So we've been doing different sorts of things in there, going in, clearing out areas, using different methods, hack and squirt, where you kind of chip into the side of the tree, put some herbicide in there. That reduces the amount of herbicide that you use. It also keeps it targeted right on that one particular organism. So you're just not going out spraying herbicide everywhere, killing everything in there. Looking at other methods of removing these, everything from just digging them up to going in and chipping them, grinding them up, seeing which methods work with different species, which ones are the best, which ones give us the best bang for our buck. We're kind of limited on money and everything like that, so we want something that works really well, but it's not expensive. We work with the Alabama Invasive Plant Council. I'm one of the board members on that. And part of our project is education. So at the Arboretum, we try to educate not only our own students, but also the general public. So we do that through having seminars and talks and putting signs out in the Arboretum. Some other stuff we're working on is a pollinator garden. All of those species declines we talked about, one of the groups that are really been impacted are the pollinators, the bees and the butterflies. They are critical for many of our crops, the foods that we eat. Without pollinators, they wouldn't produce. Talked about wiregrass. This is the wiregrass region. It's almost disappeared. Less than 3% of the longleaf pine wiregrass area remains. So one of our projects is to restore an area of the Arboretum to longleaf pine wiregrass habitat. Preserve the area, have the plants out there and use it to educate people. Let them know, hey, this is what wiregrass is. This is why this area was special. This is what we are threatened with. This is things that are causing decline. And more importantly, these are ways that you can contribute to decreasing that, things that you can do. I've done some work with the Forest Service with fire ecology. Most of the southeastern United States used to burn every 3 to 5 years, whether they were fires originally started by lightning strikes, later on the Native Americans, and then the Europeans when they got here. Almost all of the plants and animals in the southeastern United States are adapted to fire, and they actually need fire. Without fire, their invasive species come in, plants get crowded out, animals get crowded out. Plant and animal interactions, things like the pollinator studies, the spiders. I also like lichens and bryophytes, mosses. They're little plants. A lot of people like the big showy ones with pretty flowers on them, but even these little guys need somebody looking out for them. Some of the funding I get comes from doing conservation easements and rare plant surveys, and use that money to support the herbarium and the arboretum. And one thing lately that I've got involved in is the use of plants by Native Americans. Many of our drugs and many of our foods originally came from the plants in the environment around us. Many of them still do. A lot of the traditional knowledge about what these plants can be used for is being lost. People don't get that hands-on kind of education anymore. When I was little, I spent time at my grandmother's house. She took us out in the woods. We picked berries, we dug roots. She made dyes, she made soap. She had a kettle out in the yard. She made her own soap out there. All of that sort of stuff just isn't being passed on. People are living in cities. Everybody's glued to their electronic devices now. So we need to preserve that. We never know when we might need that information, when that might come available to help us out. A lot of our drugs are becoming ineffective. Bacteria and viruses and fungi, insects, they're all evolving, they're all changing. So drugs, pesticides, things that we have that work now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they may not work. If we don't have an alternative, we might be in pretty big trouble. Anybody have any questions about anything?
Good question. I've been here about 19 years, and I've spent time over those years going over to the Arboretum. And I guess first thing I want to say is just, you guys are doing such a great job.
Thank you.
It's like a sea change, and we go there just about every weekend for a walk. And so I wanted to thank you for that, for whatever part you've had in that, making that such a welcoming place. But could you talk just a little bit about the history of that and how it reflects some of what you mentioned about lack of care about our environment? Because I can remember seeing some stuff up there that was pretty creepy in terms of the environment. So.
Well, the area that's the Arboretum now was part of the Mullis property. The Mullis family lived here, and they had a small little cattle operation out there. The university bought the property in either the late 1960s or early 1970s, looking for expansion. They had originally thought that they were going to move the physical plant over there and build some dorms and things out there. When they got over there and started actually looking at the property after they had bought it, they found out that the soil over there is very unstable and would not support any large buildings. So it kind of sat there. And when I was a student here back in the 1980s, Dr. Wayne Adams was a professor in the biology department, and he became interested in the area. He taught a lot of the courses that I teach now, one of which was limnology, and he would take the students over there to do the studies of the aquatic environment. And his curiosity and my knowledge of plants kind of worked together, so he became more and more interested in plants, and he was the person who was instrumental in actually getting the Arboretum designated as such by Chancellor Adams. And I was fortunate enough that I was finishing up my master's degree at Auburn at the time, and he convinced them to bring me down and interview me for the job as first Arboretum director. And I drove down here during, it was right after an ice storm. There were trees and things on the road. Got down here, it was a Friday afternoon, went in and saw Dr. Adams. We talked about chinkapin trees, and his wife was a Kelly, and she's actually distantly related to me. And before I got back to Auburn from Troy, I had a job offer and started on Monday morning at 8 o'clock. So I came down, I took up the work that Dr. Adams had started. We had over 12 miles of trails out there. We brought in a lot of native plants. The Arboretum had basically been cleared when it was part of the cattle operation, so other than a tiny little strip along the creek, everything out there was Bahia pasture. And if you don't mow your lawn, you start getting weeds come in, eventually trees come in. Well, that's what happened with the Arboretum. Unfortunately, we're surrounded by the town, so a lot of the stuff that came in were things out of people's yard. We were working on getting all that under control. Then the university decided that it would be better for me to be full-time teaching, so I got moved to the biology department, and the Arboretum was turned over to the physical plant. And you saw what happened to it while the physical plant had it. And then about 2 years ago now, we were able to get control back from the physical plant, and it's been a ongoing project, a rewarding struggle. People like Mr. Harris, Dr. Woods, pretty much everybody here has contributed. Leanne, Paula helped find grants and things like that. We don't have a budget per se, so most of our funding comes from grants and contract work and stuff like that. And without Leanne and Paula, we would not have been able to do almost any of what we've gotten done. We have big plans. We've got like the longleaf pine wiregrass area, the pollinator garden, stuff like that. So Leanne keeps finding me grants, and I keep writing them, and we throw them out there and see what sticks to the wall. So depending on what we get funding for, keep coming out and see what we get going on.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I actually just want your perspective. So I'm sure you've seen about Duke's herbarium, right?
Mm-hmm.
What in your mind can we do here to keep that from happening?
In my years here at Troy, my feeling is that the thing that's going to motivate administration is bringing in money and having support from especially students and the community. And that's what we've been trying to do, is to get grants and things to show that we are bringing in funding to the university, but we also involve students and other people in research and projects to show that this is not something that's just sitting there, that is vital to our type of education. Just like your crayfish collections, you cannot teach this stuff without having these specimens. You can't teach somebody the difference between two different organisms if they've never seen them before just by showing them a picture. You actually have to have the organism in your hand. And then social media. I mean, that's the way to reach a lot of people now, and we've been trying to do social media post and educate people, but also get them aware of the Arboretum and the herbarium and the things that we've got going on and their importance. People are, jumped on the DNA bandwagon. It's like, oh, well, you don't even need to learn to identify these species. You just take some DNA, stick it in a machine, and it'll tell you what it is. Well, you got to train that machine to begin with. To do that, you have to have somebody that knows what you're training it. If you train it with junk, then you're going to get junk out. But even, you make mistakes, I make mistakes, machines make mistakes. You still need those experts, those people trained and able to actually look at, compare, and identify these different organisms.
Trojans Talk Research is a monthly spotlight on the research interests of Troy's faculty, presented by Troy University's Office of Sponsored Programs.